Applying to all of these like contests and fellowships, it was kind of a necessity because I was not in Los Angeles for the past however many years, and so I didn't really have the opportunity to like go be a PA or go be a writer's assistant, and so applying to contests was really the only way that I could get my work out there in any way. It still felt a little bit like sending it into the void, but like at least I knew somewhere in that void someone like legally had to read it because I paid them, and so I think when I was just starting out, I just applied to like literally everything, and whereas now I'm a little bit more selective. I'm mostly am looking for contests where like one, the panel that they have judging it is like a really solid panel of established people, and then two, the kind of reward or the prize if you win is like generals and like mentorship and getting to meet people, because you know it's great when prizes give you like a little bit of money, but it's so much more valuable when you get to form relationships. Again, it's like the people. If you look at the mentors that agreed to be part of it this year, it's pretty stacked. So I was like, yeah, I'll apply to that if there's a chance I get to like talk to any of those people, of course. So the fact that I won it is like insane. It's actually kind of funny because I was at work and I'm a teacher, and so I was expecting a call with like a speech pathologist about a student that I work with. And so when I picked up, I was fully expecting it to be the student speech pathologist, and it was not. It was Felicity who told me that I won. And then in the middle of the conversation with Felicity, I got the call from the speech pathologist. So I was kind of panicking because I was like, this is fantastic news, but also, And so I was very frazzled. I'm sure Felicity was like, what is going, is she having a stroke? What is happening? But yeah, it was very exciting and then weirdly stressful. I told my roommate, and I called like my sister and my parents, and yes, was very, very excited. There were a lot of prep meetings, and I really appreciate that. I think if I would have just like gone in blind to some of these meetings, I might have like panicked a little bit. But yeah, we had, I want to say like 4 or 5 like meetings beforehand to just like talk through how do you present yourself, like what parts of your story are most interesting and memorable, and so like after the strike is over and people might want to hire you, like what are they going to think of when they think of you, and so like making sure you've got like your little personal narrative down, being able to talk about your projects in a way that again makes them like succinct and memorable and exciting, and then also just brainstorming a lot of questions. Since this program is primarily like a mentorship opportunity, it was just brainstorming like endless questions for all of these people, because it's like, if I have you on a Zoom for half an hour, like I'm going to take advantage of it. It was a nice mix of people, like a lot of people from like the production company side of things, but also like a few writers, a few agents. Oh, I had like very specific questions for each person depending on what they did. And I think Damien Chazelle really kind of synthesized it really well, where, because I was asking him about, like, as someone who directs and has directed not his work and has directed his work and has also written for other people who then went on to direct it, he's kind of gotten to do like a few different like collaboration situations. And I was asking him, like, more so from like a director perspective, like what makes you excited to jump on to someone else's script and someone else's project, and what he said was, like, as a writer, you really have to make sure that your script checks boxes for like everyone in every step of the production process. Like, it's got to be good on the page so that when production companies read it, they are excited about it. It's got to check boxes for actors to be like, ooh, I want to dive into that. It's got to check the box for like the director of like, oh, visually I can do something interesting with that. So it's a lot of like, you kind of have to think about like every single person who's maybe one day going to be part of that process, and making sure there's something enticing for them, and feeling like, ooh, I can bring something to that. There's something there. ISA was even great. Like before the Fast Track Fellowship, there was already like generals that they were like helping set up. So I think like this year I've done, it's funny, like we're in the middle of a strike, but before the strike happened, like this was the most generals I've taken back to back to back in a long time. And so it is, it's getting easier in terms of just realizing like, no, like everybody's looking for good content. And so like if you have something that you're proud of, like they want it to be good. They want to like you. They want to find something that they want to make. So like you are set up for success as long as you just don't psych yourself out. Because like as a writer, your job is to like sit by yourself and think really hard about what you want to say and then polish what you want to say over the course of like a year. so then going into situations where you're just like on the fly is it's not as comfy, but yeah. But we got some practice now. We're getting used to it. This particular script is kind of a funny story because I had someone from Intrigue Entertainment reach out to me in 2020. Just because I had another script that had done well in the Nichols, and he had like just like a bunch of like bits of ideas and was like, if anything stands out to you, like we'll meet again and you can tell me what you've got. And this was in March of 2020. This was like our first Zoom was like, this is a weird thing that's gonna take the next 2 weeks, but we'll take a little break. And then it was the pandemic, and I was just kind of like, again, trapped in my house. It was the beginning of the pandemic. And the idea that I'm most connected to was the idea of like an elderly woman who's contemplating euthanasia and kind of roping her family into that. Because I, for years, worked as like a home care aide to the elderly when I was in college. That was like my college part-time job. And so I joke that I spent most of my early 20s with women in their early 80s, and I learned so much, and I loved them so much, and I felt like, no, I know who this woman is. And then in terms of my pre-writing process, I love a walk. I love a long walk. I love to put on music and like walk for like an hour, and like it's very meditative, and that's when a lot of my ideas come. Because like I think I had my second meeting with the guy from Intrigue, and I was like, dang, I've really got nothing. Like I've been trying, but I've got nothing. And I went for a walk like an hour before I was supposed to talk to him, and like I came back and I was like, okay, so these are the characters, and this is what happens, and this is what's the heart of it, and like it walks, man. It's funny because the same guy from Intrigue, we had a conversation once where he was like, are you an architect or are you a gardener? And I was like, oh, I'm a gardener. And in terms of how I write, it's like you just write a little bit every day, and sometimes you plant something and you come back later and it's like, oh, that's pretty. That grew really well. I'm going to keep watering that. And sometimes you plant something and it doesn't work, and so you're like, okay, and so you dig it up, and like it's for me, I'm not a huge planner. I usually have in terms of like how the idea falls into my brain when I'm on my many walks, usually the first thing I can see is I can see an image of this character, and I can kind of see the setting where they are, and I can see them make a decision. And it's like whatever that first pivotal decision they make on like page 10, you know, I see that and I get intrigued. I'm like, oh, who are you? Where'd you come from? Why are you making that choice? What's going on? And then that's always the door in for me. And then the rest of it, I don't really plan. It's kind of just like hanging out with this person and being like, okay, so that's what you chose and that's what you want. What's gonna happen since you chose that? Yeah, I'm a firm believer in like your own subconscious, like just trusting, okay, whatever floated up, it floated up from somewhere. So we're just gonna trust that there's more down there if I keep digging, you know? It kind of comes in like a clump, like a chunk. It's like this main character and like whatever decision they're making, so like whatever situation they're in, and I can see like where they're at in the beginning, and I can see where I want them to end up, and then the middle is just like blank. And so like the gardening aspect is kind of getting where they start and where they end to kind of fill in and bridge together. To me, the funniest thing in the world is like just when people are not self-aware which, because I think like none of us are completely self-aware all the time, and if we did, that would be a nightmare. Oh my God. But like, the funniest thing in the world to me is somebody who's making like a really strong decision, and they are confident that they are justified in this decision that they're making. And so grounding it is just making sure that that person has a reason and can argue like, no, I had to do that, and here's why. And when you listen to them, you might not agree with them, but you might say like, oh, I see why this person, this particular person, thought that that's what they had to do. You know, it is a weird balance. That's something I tend to find kind of in like editing and rewriting and getting like. That's something like polishing that up kind of comes towards the end when you're getting kind of the pacing and the emotional ride of it to like fine tune towards the end. But at least for me, I do think I think a lot of my stories are still very sweet. Like I never want the humor to be necessarily like at this character's expense, or like I never want you to like watch something that I've written and be like, oh fuck that guy. Like, you know, like even when people are behaving ridiculously or making wild decisions, it goes back to that, like, do you believe that this person had like a reason for doing that? Do you still care about this person and what happens to them? And yeah, like the comedy comes from like the melodrama of it all, but never at the expense of just being like, fuck that guy. You know. Sure. So it's called Euthanasia, spelled youth in Asia, and it's about a very snarky, somewhat petty elderly woman who has been diagnosed with cancer and has decided that she would like to be euthanized. It's kind of like an F you to cancer. It's like, oh, you think you can kill me? I will kill myself. Thank you. And in the process, she kind of ropes her estranged son and his 2 children into a road trip, because euthanasia is only legal in certain states. And so it's like a comedy of errors and a family trying to figure out how to be a family while in the process of like pre-grieving. And like, how do you convince someone that life is worth living? How do you how do you be a family, especially when your family is kind of crumbling, you know? So but it's a comedy of errors, and it's very, very sweet and very silly. Well, I think like the main thing that struck me when I worked with all these elderly women who I loved so dearly, they were all still so emotionally invested in things that had happened like 30, 40 years ago. Like, they were still mad that their sister said that thing, and they were still pissed at their ex-husband, and they were still like, they still had regret that like the thing went down with their kid that way. And like it's interesting as someone who's more towards the beginning of their life, seeing what people care about at the end of their life was very interesting. I had one woman who was 103, and every single day that I showed up, I was a little nervous that she was going to be gone. But she was 103 and still kicking, still very active. And someone from the local news came to interview her when she turned 104. And they were asking her all these questions of like, so you've lived through like the invention of electricity and multiple world wars, and you've lit like, what from history has stood out the most to you in that time? And she got really quiet, and she was like, honestly, like most of my memories are just my family. And I guess that's true. That's life. At the end, that's really just your family. Of like, yeah, just like family being like very messy, but also like they're really the only people that, if you're lucky, you spend the entirety of your life with. Everybody else, all the people that you choose, like come and go, but like your family, those are the people from like birth to tomb, if you're lucky. So yeah, and also my own father was diagnosed with cancer in this past winter, and now he's done with chemo. So like from personal experience, it is something that makes you your priorities shift immediately in the best way. It's a very obviously was very scary and stressful, but also like having your priorities shift, the clarity of like, okay, this matters, everything else is like, I don't care about that thing over there anymore. I was so stressed about that. That's nothing. Oh yeah, absolutely. It was such a great time. I got to meet so many cool people, and they all had like such wonderful advice, and were so generous with their time. A lot, like most of the mentors also like actually read my work and had like great feedback, and apply. Go apply right now. It's great. Seal of approval.